one of the biggest financial frauds in American history.
Hello and welcome to Web3s, the bite-sized podcast where we explore all things Web3. And today we have a big one. In fact, it could be the biggest crypto fraud case in US history. I'm talking about the trial of Sam Bankman-Fried, the founder of Alameda Research and FTX. Now, if that doesn't mean anything to you, don't worry. In this episode, we're going to cover who is FBF and what the F happened. Secondly, give us some of the gossip and the entanglements. But finally, what lessons can we learn from the SBF and FTX saga? So it's a hot one. Let's go. So first up, what the hell happened? Well, we have to start with the main character, Sam Bankman-Fried, also known as SBF. He's an MIT graduate of physics and maths who goes on to found in 2017 a crypto investment firm called Alameda Research. Now at this time, Sam is looking for arbitrage opportunities in the crypto space, and he identifies one particular opportunity where Bitcoin is trading slightly lower in the US than it is in Japan. And so he starts to arbitrage on that trade, and Alameda is off and out of the blocks. Business is good. So come 2019, as crypto is coming out of a winter and into a bit of a boom, Sam then sees the opportunity to launch a crypto exchange called FTX. Now, FTX, consumers around the world can come onto the platform and buy crypto using their fiat currency. So they can send in pounds or dollars and buy a range of cryptos that are available on the platform. Again, business is good. The exchange quickly becomes one of the biggest in the world. And to provide a perspective, at its peak, it was doing over $21 billion in transaction volumes per day. 21 billion. So, sounds good so far. What's the scandal here? Well, the reason I took the time to set out the relationship between Sam founding Alameda Research first and then FTX is it's the relationship between these two businesses that ultimately has caused the downfall of SBF, but most importantly, over 1 million customers to lose over $9 billion. And what happened here is not something that is unique to crypto. In fact, if we go back to just 2008, it's very similar to the financial crisis. Okay, so what happened? We have FTX. It's growing. It's holding customer deposits who want to buy cryptos of various sorts. The money that FTX has should be held separately, should be protecting customer deposits, just like banks should. And Alameda Research, which is a separate trading company, should not be able to access customer money from FTX to then use in riskier trades. But that's exactly what happens. And there are a number of things that the trial will thrash out. But what I think is key to ascertain is there is a version, I think, of this story where ultimately things got away from SBF and the management teams at both FTX and Alameda Research because there was some transactions that existed between the two. For example, with FTX being in the crypto space where regulations are grey to say the least, getting a bank account is really, really tough. So in the early days, customers would wire transfers to Alameda, who would then move the money to FTX so customers could have money to use on the FTX platform. So there was a bit of intercompany movement that was going on that apparently was being tracked by basic Google Sheets.
Right, you rewind to 2019, 2020, FTX didn't have bank accounts. And that was because as a global crypto exchange at the time, almost none of them were able to get, global banking. Some customers still wanted to onboard fiat currencies though. FTX was maintaining cryptocurrency wallets, but not banking accounts. And so some of them would wire money to Alameda and then ask to be credited on their FTX account.
So how many billions of dollars are we talking about, at least ballpark?
I think north of 5.
But ultimately, I think if you look at the bigger pictures, the numbers increased and they increased significantly. One of the things that happened here, and I think this is unique to crypto, is that FTX was able to create its own token, its own fungible token, that it used to reward customers on its platform. It would buy back and then burn those tokens. But Alameda Research was also sitting on a lot of those tokens and using them as an asset to then back borrowings. So in effect, when it borrowed money from the FTX platform, its collateral, its asset, was FTX's own token, FTT. And to provide a perspective, Alameda sat on $6 billion of this stuff. And so when times were good, the equation balanced. FTT had a market value. Alameda was using it as an asset to back against loans. And so the whole thing worked. The problem occurs when effectively the news broke that Alameda was sat on $6 billion worth of FTT. And when this happened, it spooked the market. One, because, hey, this is a little bit interesting that a company founded by the now founder of FTX and the token FTT is sitting on a bunch of the stuff. And secondly, because 2022 had been a turbulent year for the crypto space in general, with a number of high-profile companies and exchanges going bust. And so what happened was a vicious cycle. Firstly, holders of FTT panicked and tried to sell it quickly. That dropped the value of FTT by 75% in just a couple of days. With the falling value of FTT, Alameda Research no longer had adequate collateral to back the loans that it had been making.
What is this? What is this? Where's all the money?
That's as good as money, sir. Those are IOUs. Go ahead and add it up. Every cent's accounted for. Look. See this? That's a car. 275,000. Might want to hang on to that one.
Because of the news on the FTX side that Alameda was effectively sitting on $6 billion worth of their token, customers understandably got worried and started to withdraw their funds from the platform, and they withdrew them in their droves. And so then FTX started to struggle with liquidity because the collateral posted by Alameda could not be liquidated, and therefore they could not meet the withdrawal requests. So just 7 days after the original article went live, FTX and Alameda Research had no other option than to call for bankruptcy. And so that is the background. It's not a simple summary, but I hope that gives an impression of how we got there and what happened. So then we move on to section 2. Like, well, what's the goss here? What's the entanglement that's got the press excited? Well, with any good tech founder, you always have interesting personas. And what I think is really interesting is that persona, when the business was perceived to be doing well, was perceived to be prodigal. Like this kid is special. He plays games during meetings. He can multitask. He's one of those sort of magic men. But then in hindsight, when things go wrong, we then see that same person and that same behavior negatively. And we'll say that person never paid attention, felt he was above everyone else, never listened. That's a symptom of the problem. So I always find that an interesting bias that we have as a before and after. But Sam as a character was super interesting, and we do not have the time to go into a lot of those characteristics and a lot of the things he did over that 3-year period. But I think what gets a lot of people's attention is the living arrangements of the management team. All 10 of them shared a penthouse apartment in the Bahamas, which was the epicenter of FTX and Alameda. They were all rumored to have been in a relationship with someone in that penthouse at some point in that 3-year period. And most interestingly, Sam and the CEO of Alameda Research, Caroline Ellison, were in an entanglement together that was shared online and in forums. And so you can see how there's an interesting human story to be covered here as well. And where the plot thickens is as this trial goes on, Caroline and a couple of the management team, including the co-founder and CTO of FTX, Gary Wang, will be ultimately testifying against FBF in his trial, where he's currently under 7 charges. So I think that's going to be a really interesting watch, and the dynamics between the characters, I'm sure, will add into the drama. And then finally, as we come away from the gossip, and for me, what's important here is how do we learn lessons? And for me, whenever I'm speaking to anyone about FTX, Alameda, FBF, I think we touch on some of the things I've discussed in the pod today. One is this is not a unique thing to crypto, and so it shouldn't be used to bash the industry and some of the things that people are trying to innovate to improve the financial systems. This is very similar to the financial crisis, and I think it's a story of how humans, we get ourselves into situations where, firstly, if we're winning, we think that streak's going to continue forever. I think we kind of get high off our own supply. That confidence tends to have an ability to attract others, whether that's investors, whether that's customers, whether that's the management team. And the behavior that you set at the top, I think, has a habit of forming the relationships that run right the way through all stakeholders. And so I think what we can learn from this whole thing as we come through it is, as investors, we need to get better at appraising founders and investment opportunities. We need to do proper due diligence, even in emerging spaces, so that we understand what that company is doing. And the better we understand that, the better we can support them on their journey, because as with any new space, as with any innovation, there's so many uncharted waters that need to be crossed by that management team. And so we should be making sure that the waters we know and have already mapped out, compliance, good systems and processes, good HR and people management, like, let's make sure that they're lit, the financial systems are strong, so we can support those entrepreneurs as they look to tackle those bigger challenges and open up new worlds and horizons. So I think that is a really big lesson from the investor side. From the consumer side, I do think there's an interesting relationship between the confidence that consumers get from the types of investors that backed FTX and backed Sam, because I think that sometimes there's an ability for consumers to defer proper due diligence on the basis that they believe, well, if this VC has got involved, hey, must have checked out, must have been through a brutal DD process. So I think some transparency there would help consumers, and consumers should also not just go off the backs of other people. They should make sure they do their due diligence themselves, even if the opportunity seems super exciting, because we all know, like, if something seems too good to be true, than it usually is. And then finally, I think we have to be careful of the people that we build up. Sam is an interesting character. I don't know him, but I've followed the story for the past 12 months, and I think it's interesting how he was built up prior to the collapse of FTX and heralded as the crypto king. He sat in front of Congress and spoke about regulation. He backed politicians. And so I think one of the things we all need to get better at is not necessarily pinning our hopes on heroes. At the end of the day, a good company needs a great leader, for real, get that. But also it needs a great management team and it needs a great culture. And I think we need to get better at identifying that it's not one person, that it's a team that will deliver success and can deliver returns, whatever it is that you're looking for, and not just the individual. If we can do that, I think we'll all make better decisions. So yeah, that is an introduction to the FTX Alameda FBF fiasco. It's something that I'm sure I'll cover a couple of times because the case has just kicked off this week. So I'm sure there'll be some updates. He's being tried for 7 charges at the moment, but then there's another case next year for a further 6. So yeah, this story is going to run for a while. But do let me know your take on this podcast, your take on what you think happened at FTX and at Alameda and with Sam and the team. Would love to get your insights. As always, thank you for taking the time to tune in. I hope this has added value. If it has, please give it a like or share it with somebody who you feel it'll add value to. That's it for this week. Take care, and I'll catch you on the next one.